Welcome to day 4 of the 13 days of Halloween with me, your host, Eddie Spuhghetti. Leading up to Halloween, I'm going to be discussing my favorite films and TV shows and TV specials that I like to watch around this time of year because I feel that they just work extra spookily. Is spookily a word? Who cares? Let's talk about my fourth pick. The Night Stalker, 1972, directed by John Moxey, written by Richard Matheson, based on a novel by Jeff Rice, starring Darren McGavin, Carol Lindley, and Simon Oakland. The newspaper reporter Carl Kolchak in Las Vegas is investigating a serial killer who shares a lot of traits with that of a vampire. Generally what the story's about. Yeah, it's a vampire film. But it's good. There is a fuck ton of people who appreciate this film, okay? And really specifically because it's their gateway movie to horror. So when this came out, it was a television film. It was not a theatrical release. And because of the fact that it came out on TV, it was widely accessible to many, many, many people, including a lot of children. And a lot of those children, it was like the first horror movie they saw, really. Like, obviously, there's a lot of kids who watched horror movies, but for a lot of kids who kind of weren't allowed to go see films at the theater, obviously, like this was a full horror movie that they were allowed to essentially watch because it was on television, it was accessible to everybody, and it was acceptable to a broadcast standard. So it had a really big impact on a lot of people, and there are a lot of people still to this day who say this is the movie that got them into horror, and that's something powerful. This is a great example of mixing supernatural with a cop procedural. It's done very, very seriously. There's no tongue-in-cheek kind of stuff. At the point in time when this came out, cop procedurals were like fairly popular. I mean, you had like Dragnet and that sort of shit and Peter Gunn. But all of a sudden, here's kind of this like TV movie that takes the cop procedural. Essentially, Carl is a really fucking good cop. Like he's a clean, down-to-earth kind of cop, but he's a reporter. But he all of a sudden comes across this supernatural element and he's like, whoa, this shit's real. And he wants to present everything as fact as much as he can, obviously. Everything has to be fact. And he comes across this whole thing that is purely fact and nobody wants to believe him. And it's like frustrating as fuck because it involves the supernatural. But it's like, hey, listen, maybe take in consideration that we don't have all the answers for this sort of stuff and think about maybe the plausibility that like, hey, maybe there is such a thing as a vampire and we just haven't seen it for very long. I mean, there's always that thing that they used to say, I think it was like that Winona Ryder movie, the one with Gary Oldman in it, where he's old and he becomes young and Keanu Reeves, Dracula, whoa. Like that movie. I'm pretty sure there was a thing in that movie where they were talking about like the power of the vampire is the disbelief in it. I could be wrong, I could be thinking of something else totally. But it's very much like that, like the power of this guy in this film who can continue to kill basically anybody and feast on their blood. He's just getting away with it because nobody fucking believes in what he's actually doing. They just think he's a nut. Darren McGavin, of course, is wonderful. I mean, you can't help but enjoy anything I think that Darren McGavin has been in. No matter even if he's like playing a villain or he's playing a good guy or whatever, he's a wonderful actor. And of course, Kolchak is his best role. By far, it is definitely the role that was suited for him. Very much like Fletch was for Chevy Chase. Like it makes sense when you watch him portray the character. He knows it inside out. He really keeps this movie going. I think if there was anybody else in that role, it would be really hard to recommend this movie. He plays such a vital part in the success of The Night Stalker. I mean, I watched it at an early age. Like, we would used to go to a rental store and we would always buy films from the used section. We would never actually really rent anything because the used section only had like older stuff. It never really had anything new, but it had older stuff in it and a lot of stuff that we always kind of wanted a copy of, my family. And Night Stalker, I think we wound up getting both this film and the sequel on tape. We managed to find both of them. And I remember my folks were like, you're gonna watch this, you're gonna like it, it's like X-Files. And when they said like X-Files, I almost shit my pants. I mean, I was very young, but I almost shit my pants because X-Files for me was that fucking show that they would watch at like 8 o'clock at night when I was trying to go to bed upstairs. The theme song's like pitch is so fucking high, it can go through floorboards. So you can hear that no matter where. So like think about like trying to fall asleep to that shit. Like it is not fun. X-Files itself, I hated that show just because of the theme song bullshit. And Kolchak was very different. So if anything, it helped me enjoy the X-Files eventually, because I got really into Night Stalker. I watched the sequel, I watched the series, and then all of a sudden I was like, I think I have to go on to X-Files. And I did, and Spooky Mulder. That is the Night Stalker, and what a fucking movie, okay? Darren McGavin is wonderful as Carl Kolchak. He's one of the best things about this film. It is very creepy, it is very well done, and if you're a fan of the X-Files, I would say definitely check this one out, because you're gonna be not only be seeing where the inspiration comes from, but you're kind of seeing like a kind of different version of how that show would work. Now, there's a lot of people that I know that love the X-Files and did give this one a try, and they weren't 100% into it because of its pace. And again, it's a little dated. It's 72, so obviously like shit's old. People have terrible clothes, a lot of brown. It is what it is. And some people could say the same thing about X-Files, the earlier seasons. A lot of Hondas, a lot of baggy clothes. It is what it is. But they are fairly similar to extents, and I think it's important, if you're a fan of the X-Files, to at least know where that all came from, and at least give Night Stalker a chance, because it is really fucking great. It's a very cool TV movie, and again, check it out. That does it for my fourth pick for the 13 days of Halloween. Thank you for joining me again. I'm of course Eddie Spuhghetti, and for the next couple of days leading up to Halloween, I will be returning with more of my favorite picks for stuff that I love to watch around this time of year, be it film, TV shows, or even TV specials. Until then, we'll do lunch.